What is up, Penn State fans? It's Max Ralph and Johnny McGonigal from PennLive here on the Blue White Breakdown. This is a big one, Johnny. A huge news day and news week, really. If you go back to, I believe it literally is a week to the day, or maybe a week plus a day that Andy Kotelnicki said he was coming back to Penn State. The transfer portal has opened up. We talked a ton about it last week. But if we're getting into the real nuts and bolts here of this Monday afternoon, Johnny, Beau Pribula, Penn State's backup quarterback, is headed to the portal. I believe he's already in it. I don't know for sure, but he's going. He's not playing against SMU this weekend. He's done. Drew Allar is coming back to Penn State. That was today's news. I guess last night was Beau's news. We talked to James Franklin, Andy Kotelnicki, Drew Allar, Tyler Warren, and Nick Dawkins today as we prepare for Penn State's playoff against SMU. So we got a heck of a lot of stuff to hit on here, Johnny, but let me just check in with you first. Big day of work and talking with people. So where's your head at?
Man, it's all over the place, right?
Yeah.
I'll say this: nothing that came out over the last 24 to 48 hours, as we record this on Monday night, a little after 5 o'clock. None of it surprises me. Beau Pribula leaving and entering the transfer portal does not surprise me. It surprises me a little bit that he won't be around, with the team, for the college football playoff, for this weekend's game against SMU and any other games after that for the Nittany Lions. But we'll get into why ultimately, he made that decision and was in a way forced to make that decision. And Drew Allar, expecting to return for the 2025 season, letting his intentions be known to the coaching staff, to teammates. That was kind of trending in that direction, keeping our ears close to the ground in the Lash building and talking to some people, behind those doors. It seemed like that was the way it was going to go. But still a good sign for Penn State, and ultimately for Drew Allar's draft stock and draft prospects. I was able to talk to Dane Brugler, the lead NFL draft analyst for The Athletic, one of the most knowledgeable and well-sourced guys out there, for a story that I have coming out on Tuesday morning on Drew's NFL stock, looking ahead to 2026 and why he made this decision from an NFL standpoint. But I'll get into that in a little bit as well. But let's start with Beau. Max, and I think because that impacts Penn State more in the short term.
Yep.
His decision to leave, that he won't be around. The Pribula package is no more for Andy Kotelnicki. What do you make of his decision to enter the portal and everything that kind of goes along with that?
Yeah, the Pribula package. I mean, that's another wrinkle of this that we've got to get into. Like you said, I think we got to start with Beau because it is so immediate. But let's start with this. James Franklin has a typical operating plan. I don't remember what he said. It was the acronym SOP, Standard
Operating Procedure.
Standard operating procedure at Penn State, where if you say you're going to the portal, you ain't coming back. You're not playing. You're done. Now, he did admit today that some things are a little bit flexible. They don't want to set bad precedents, having a guy come back. But when it's your backup quarterback who really does not want to leave Penn State right now in the middle of this playoff run, you might try and make things work. Beau Pribula was out at practice on Sunday. He's been with the team recently, and Franklin said as early as last week when they talked, he had zero intention of leaving before the playoff game. There is a world in which he could stay, and after the playoff run, have a 5-day window to transfer. But they just tried. They talked about it. They tried to figure it out. Franklin said it wasn't going to work. He said he saw Beau at practice on Sunday, and he just felt he looked distracted. Pribula is trying to finish up his degree right now. He's graduating in December. Said that there was some external pressure to go on visits to certain places. I don't know exactly where that is yet. I have some ideas, but nothing confirmed. I'm sure it'll come out soon. But there were a lot of things that made this happen for Beau, because there's the other aspect of this where if you're a quarterback, there's only one starting quarterback job on every team in college football. Beau Pribula is good enough to do it at, X institutions, probably Group of 5 easily, lower level power 4, I think he probably could too, and that's probably where he's looking right now. If you're not there by the spring period learning the playbook, you're toast. You have to be there long enough to learn the playbook, get integrated with the system, and the only way he was going to be able to do that was entering the portal now before all the spots are taken up. Regardless of what Penn State does in the playoff, he needs to do it now. It's a terrible system in college football. That's what James Franklin got at all day. He really had, and Johnny, you may want to talk about this a little bit more, but he had quite an indictment against the NCAA in the timing of this. The fact that he's forced to do this right before a playoff game. He said, I give you my word, Beau Pribula did not want to leave Penn State, but his hand was kind of forced. His hand was forced by the timing. His hand was forced by Drew's decision to come back. Because listen, he's not going to start over Drew. As good as Beau might be, Drew is better. He's a better NFL prospect. He's a better thrower of the football. He's a better offensive orchestrator. Beau was never starting on this team in 2025 if Drew was back. So all of those things factored in for Beau to kind of see the writing on the wall. The timing is such a problem, though. Johnny, if you want to take over a little bit on that front.
Yeah, James Franklin was asked about Beau Pribula entering the portal. It was the first thing he was asked at his Monday press conference that, was previously scheduled to talk about SMU, right, over these next 2 days, between Franklin, the coordinators, both offensive and defensive, Kotelnicki and Allen, and then a list of, distinguished players from either side of the ball we're going to be talking to, mandated by the CFP. This is not something that I think James Franklin thought that he would be talking about necessarily. Like you mentioned, up until last week when he had a conversation with Beau, he thought he wasn't going to be leaving. So that was the first thing, understandably, that he was asked at Monday's press conference. And he spent 5.5 minutes talking about Beau Pribula. And he said that he wanted to just have this be about Beau. And he called him a phenomenal teammate, a wonderful young man, someone who dreamt of coming to Penn State, the ultimate teammate, the ultimate guy that you want in your locker room. And that bore out, by the way, over the last 24 hours when you have, guys like Denai Dennis-Sutton, Nick Dawkins, Dom DeLuca tweeting their support, even former quarterback Sean Clifford, and then the guys today, Drew, Tyler, et cetera, putting their support behind Beau Pribula and hoping that he lands in a really good situation. But James also not used it, but I guess felt compelled to have more of a broader conversation about the transfer portal schedule right now, the college football landscape. Talking about how there has to be a commissioner, there has to be leadership within college football. There has to be someone who can fix this, really, because he said he was concerned about the state of the sport. And that's what happens, I guess, when you are directly affected by it. Not saying that Franklin didn't feel like this before. But yeah, I mean, when Beau Pribula, you mentioned those external pressures, Max, that he was probably weighing on his mind during practice on Sunday when James Franklin said he looked distracted. I mean, we talked about him having to go and be somewhere for spring practice to learn the playbook and everything for him to have a chance at starting at a new school. He's got to go on visits and talk to other coaches to learn to understand the playbook and see how he would fit. I mean, he's not your traditional drop back passer. He's a dual threat. He's got to know the offensive coordinator, the skill players that would surround him at a next school. Like there's a lot of digging that has to go on. I remember talking to Julian Fleming back in April. It's different for a wide receiver, but, so much of his visit to Penn State was, I know Penn State, I'm comfortable here, but show me the playbook, show me how I fit in this offense. And so Beau Pribula has to get that done over the next really couple of weeks, if not sooner. And so it's a lot for a player like him to have to deal with at a time when he wants so desperately to help this team push on towards a national championship. But when you've got Miller Moss leaving USC to go to Louisville, that Auburn filled a spot. Like there's all these different schools across the country. There's over 1,700 players in the transfer portal right now. A lot of them are quarterbacks, and a lot of those quarterbacks have already switched hands. Michael Van Buren going from Mississippi State to LSU. Like these spots are getting filled up quick. And if you're waiting around, and, you'll see the field for 7 or 8 plays unless Drew Allar gets hurt in a playoff game. But you got to look towards your future. You got to look towards the long-term goal. And unfortunately, with how this is set up right now, that means Beau Pribula not being on this team for the college football playoff.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, Beau said it in his statement that it was an impossible decision, and I think it was. I just it's true. Like what James Franklin said, this kid is from York, Pennsylvania. He's wanted to play in the blue and white forever, and he did. Bob and I recorded a brief reaction video earlier today that didn't go as in depth on this as what we're talking about now. But Bob brought up a good point. Like, without Beau Pribula this season, Penn State probably isn't in the college football playoff because he took over against Wisconsin and led a second half comeback win. I mean, they were only down 3, but it's still a comeback win because Allar got hurt. Like, he was adamantly, by Andy Kotelnicki, one of Penn State's most talented players this year and needed to be in the game plan each week. And he was. I mean, some weeks more than others, but he was constantly playing 5+ snaps in a gadget role as a quarterback, as a threat to run, throw, hand off. Like, there are a lot of different ways that Beau is being used this year. His value is, hard to set. Like, it's hard to describe because, like somebody in our comments here has said, Penn State is one play away from Allar getting hurt against SMU and needing to put in Jackson Smolik, who might have appeared in one game last season and has been hurt all year, but was medically cleared in the past week, is what James Franklin said, or Ethan Grunkemeyer, who's been the number 3 all year, true freshman who has not played a snap. You're one play away from that being a reality for Penn State. And while we've heard good things about both of those guys, they're not Beau. They don't have the experience that Beau has. And so this just sucks. Like from any perspective, this sucks because you hate to see it for a guy like Beau, who, sure, the writing was on the wall. He was probably going to play somewhere else next year with Drew back. That's fine. But he didn't want to do it now. He wanted to see this thing out with this team. He has really close friends. I mean, Tyler Warren, who we talked to today, is one of them. They're roommates. Those guys are really close. I believe Liam Clifford is close with them too. Like, he has friends on this team. He cares about this team. The way that James Franklin talked about him today, like, there's no ill will with the staff, with anyone here. So this just sucks to see from any perspective. Johnny, you have something to add?
Yeah, well, you mentioned Tyler Warren, and after the Maryland game, the regular season finale, at that point, after that win, Penn State was going to the Big Ten championship game. And there was an opportunity or a chance that, if they beat Oregon, right, they were going to get a first round bye and would not return to Beaver Stadium this season. And so when I was on the field after the game, after the Maryland game, taking some video, taking some notes on the celebrations, on the vibes and everything else, noticed Tyler Warren taking pictures with a lot of guys because it was like, okay, that, like, Tyler Warren is going to the NFL draft. This could be his last moments at Beaver Stadium. Turns out it's not, right? They lost to Oregon, right, and they'll be playing SMU this weekend. But one of the guys he was taking photos with was Beau Pribula. And it didn't register with me at that time, but it did last night, that was Beau Pribula's last time at Beaver Stadium.
Yeah.
And he thought that it might be as well because if they beat Oregon, first round bye, et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to be weird not seeing number 9 out there, the Trace McSorley lookalike. In a Penn State uniform. Like you said, it sucks, man. Like it sucks for him. It sucks for Penn State that they're not going to have an experienced backup. Like you mentioned, someone who went in and won the game for them against Wisconsin this year. He filled in the Rutgers game last year. Like, he was a big part of this offense in more ways than one. Excuse my alarm that just decided to go off to remind me to text you about doing a podcast.
There we go.
And we are currently doing one, so I can turn that off now.
Hey, at least I was on top of it for once.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it's just an unfortunate situation, right? It's just an unfortunate situation that you don't want to have happen. Like you mentioned, Ethan Grunkemeyer, there have been a lot of, strong words of support and really good reviews from the true freshman quarterback over the last month, really, asking Drew Allar and other teammates about him. So if something were to happen to Drew, I would expect that it would be Ethan, given that, Jackson's been out for so long and Ethan's been taking more reps than he has been, certainly, even though he hasn't been taking, reps with the 1s and 2s, with it being Drew and Beau the whole time. But just something to keep in mind.
Yeah. I mean, the other layer of this too is the way that Beau was used in that gadgety type role, I mean, he was running routes half the time. He was almost like a wildcat quarterback, even though he is actually a quarterback. Penn State still wants to have that in the game plan. James Franklin said that they want to do that. They plan to have that creativity still there. It's just going to have to come from other places. So, I expect, I believe that you will see even more Tyler Warren in, special ways, whether it's wildcat quarterback, whether it's, whatever it is. I think you might see a little more Nick Singleton doing the wildcat too, is my anticipation for this weekend, because those plays are not leaving the playbook. They're still going to use the things that Beau did, but they don't have Beau to do it. We do have a couple of live stream questions here that do fit into what we're doing. Real quickly, do we think that the NCAA will change the rules around the portal? That's a question that goes above our pay grade, unfortunately. Mitch, who asked it. The one thing that I will say that makes all of this difficult is the issue of an academic calendar. Like Penn State's finals week is going on right now, and these athletes have to be a student enrolled in a university in order to play at a university. So can they change? They really can't change when the transfer portal window opens up. Like they have to be able to be enrolled on a campus at the right time. If anything changes, it's probably the dates of competition, or maybe the date that the portal window opens up for it to be after the semester is over. But I don't know what the fix is. Like I said, I think that's a little above our pay grade, and that's a reason why it's been a problem across college football. Like that's why Marshall isn't playing in a bowl game, because its entire team is portaled, because there isn't a good answer right now.
Yeah, one thing I would add, and talking about it being above our pay grade, like I'm not a lawyer or anything. I don't know the ins and outs of
Right.
collective bargaining, but I have read, by some people who are smarter than me, talking about that being a potential option, that presenting a potential solution to this issue in terms of getting around or working around the academic calendar and enrollment, and if you were to have these players essentially contracted, that could be a workaround. But that also feels like a far way off from being a reality. I mean, I know that there's some juice around it, there's some talk around it, there have been conversations around it within the sports hierarchy, but not like it's going to get fixed, for the spring portal, or in the next couple of days or weeks to let Beau play with Penn State. So something to keep in mind, though.
Yeah, it's a shame. I do expect it to change, honestly, at some point. I just have no idea how or when. Obviously, This is unsustainable. Let's pivot. We had a question about Drew's announcement, and we wanted to dive into this a little bit anyway, Johnny. So let's fold this into what we were going to talk about regardless. Does Drew's announcement, bring in a little more interest from top transfer receivers? Just very quickly before I throw this over to you, Johnny, I do. I think that this changes what Penn State can do, whether it's the portal or high school. I talked to wide receiver Kobe Howard, who's a signee and going to be on campus in January a couple times over the fall. And he even mentioned the last time I talked to him, we weren't positive that Drew was coming back. He didn't know it either, but he did mention it like, hey, this is a possibility. If that happens, I am freaking hyped to go play with him, because he's a top NFL talent next year. Like if things go as planned, he's pretty easily a second rounder and maybe jumps into the first round. So definitely guys are excited about playing with Drew. And I do think that there's probably some behind the scenes pitching going on from the coaching staff that says, hey, guess what? This guy is coming back. This guy who is going to be a first round quarterback, he's coming back. So, they've already got a few wide receivers that have visited campus. So I definitely think that's part of it. But Johnny, dive into your thoughts on Drew coming back, and maybe a little bit of what you heard from Dane Brugler.
Yeah, so one quick thing to add on the whole recruitment side of it, right? Like having Drew in the building, I think a part of it is also having Andy Kotelnicki back as the offensive coordinator. Like you mentioned, it was a week ago or so. The days are blending in. But Andy announcing that he would be back as the offensive coordinator after a really successful first year. You look at their yards per play. I mean, there's a massive jump that Penn State had this year as compared to last year under Mike Yurcich. And you look at the development of Drew Allar, and he's undoubtedly a better quarterback now than he was last year. And having Drew and Andy together, that partnership going into the 2025 season, if that's the case, I mean, that's huge. And that sells to wide receivers in the portal. And that certainly, I'm sure, helped them secure some guys in the 24 class as well. Because like I said, this was something that had been trending in this direction, that Drew would come back. One thing I will note is that it's the phrasing around it. And Drew and James Franklin today said nothing that would suggest that he won't actually be back next year.
Correct.
But just something to note here. It was that, Pete Thamel's report from ESPN is that he informed Penn State of his intentions to come back. Mm-hmm. And we see some wild stuff in college football, and intentions can change. And this is something that Dane Brugler, the draft analyst for The Athletic, actually brought up to me, kind of unsolicited, where he said, this is the first year of the 12-team playoff. There's a chance that these quarterbacks, these players, are going to be playing 4 games and pushing on to a national title. And that can change the narrative, from an NFL perspective on some of these players. And he said that, that if Drew Allar is the reason why Penn State goes and wins a national title or gets to the title game, which is certainly a possibility given their path and who they would play, that could actually change Drew's decision. Now, that's not him being sourced into Drew's family or anything. That's just from an NFL guy talking ball and talking about the scenario that everyone is looking at right now with the playoff. So he also had some really good things to say about Drew, said he wasn't surprised by his decision, and ultimately saw a lot of growth from him this year from an accuracy standpoint, from a pocket awareness standpoint. Mentioned that he gets locked onto primary receivers a little bit too much and needs to work on that. But did say that, he would be, maybe number 15 to 50 pick in the 2025 draft. It's a wide range.
Yeah.
But if you were looking at, 2026, he said there's a real opportunity for him to be QB1. That he could be the number 1 quarterback in the 2026 NFL draft class. And at that point, you have a chance to be the number 1 overall pick. Yeah. And if he played looking to next season, assuming he is there, right? And if he plays consistently how he played in the Oregon game, minus the 2 mistakes, you're looking at a potential number 1 overall pick. And that's not hyperbole. That's not getting ahead of ourselves. That's a real possibility.
Yeah. I mean, the other part of it too, that I think is pretty obvious to everybody, but you don't want to overlook when you're having these conversations, is the fact that the kid is still 6'5" and is running pretty well and moving around the pocket at an elite level, I would say. I mean, his pocket presence has been great since his freshman year, and it's only gotten better. If you look at a guy like Anthony Richardson, who obviously runs a lot better than Drew Allar, or Will Levis, who maybe has a stronger arm and runs better, but those 2 guys were drafted highly in large part because of their potential and the project, aspect of what they could become. Drew Allar could very easily be that guy too. Not only is he producing on the field, but he has the measurables that you want. He could probably sling it 80 yards if he wanted to. He's legit. As far as the Andy Kotelnicki thing goes too, I thought James Franklin was really interesting today. I just put up a story on PennLive. You can read a little bit more about Andy Kotelnicki and his return. But James Franklin was like, yeah, we had to work all offseason with 3 new coordinators to make sure that we didn't have any negative effects on the field. Obviously, it didn't. They went 11-1. But having Kotelnicki back next year, he said the word foundation. And I do think that, as there always is with James Franklin, there was probably some subliminal messaging there. To say, listen, yeah, this helps our recruiting. Andy Kotelnicki is back. We have a top offense in the Big Ten because of this guy, because of Drew. This is foundation. This is a real thing. This matters. Let's pivot just a tiny little bit to Ethan Grunkemeyer and Jackson Smolik. You made mention of them, Johnny. But I do believe that Grunkemeyer will be the number 2 moving forward. I think Jackson Smolik is a guy that the staff likes his arm talent, but he lacks experience just like Grunkemeyer. And I think the numbers that James Franklin threw out for us today was that Gronk has taken about 350 snaps, whether it be in scout team scrimmages or whatever it is, and Smolik has had only the past week. So I do believe Grunkemeyer is the QB2 moving forward. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of buzz about this kid, but it's just hard to say that he'll be ready if he needs to because of the situation.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't seen meaningful snaps. I mean, and I you know what, I take that back because, we talked earlier, in I guess not earlier in the month. I guess it was last month we were having this conversation about what James Franklin was defining as a meaningful snap. And, he was saying that on Sundays when they have Sunday practices after games, that it was a lot of Ethan Grunkemeyer, taking developmental reps and, whether it's live scrimmages or, true 11 on 11s, like he's taking those live reps there. So that's meaningful to him and that's meaningful to his development. But I mean, on the field, like against an actual opponent, like a real opponent, and then in a college football playoff game, and God forbid, like, if Drew were to get hurt against Boise, at the Fiesta Bowl or in a semifinal against Georgia or Notre Dame or Indiana, you don't have the Beaver Stadium crowd at your back. I mean, yeah, there'll be a lot of Penn State fans traveling, but that would be even a more difficult situation to have to deal with if you're a true freshman quarterback, taking your first real reps in your collegiate career in a spot like that with a potential national title on the line. Like that's really hard to deal with. That's hard to do. So that's something to consider. Maybe I don't know if that changes the game plan at all for Penn State, like in terms of how they decide to use Drew. If they're not going to do the tush push in the red zone, or they don't draw up as many design runs for him, or if he's a little bit more hesitant to scramble. Like I don't know if it's going to really change how they use him, but every hit he takes from now on, like I know Penn State fans are going to be cringing a little bit, knowing that they don't have Beau Pribula as backup.
I can hear it now. Our little row in the press box of you, me, Bob Flounders, John Sauber. Like I can hear the every time Drew takes off this weekend.
Yeah,
I think so. I'm writing about Grunkemeyer in the QB2 situation is something that's coming Tuesday morning for you PennLive faithful from me. But I think just as a little teaser, maybe the best thing that I've heard about Ethan Grunkemeyer so far that gives me confidence in him. We talked to Julian Fleming at an NIL event recently. Some guys were handing out or buying toys for Tots Drive. He was there. We talked to him a little bit, had some great stuff about the drive. He's always been a very candid guy, coming back home for his 5th year. But because he's such a candid guy, when Ethan Grunkemeyer came up, I suggest listening and really processing what he says, because there's a difference between just hyping up your teammates as, Penn State players are media trained to do, and saying it in the way that Julian did. And he was basically like, this kid is legit. Like he's going to be really good. He's a great quarterback that I've caught passes from. And I looked at him and I go, Julian, you've played with some pretty freaking good quarterbacks before. Like Julian played with CJ Stroud and Justin Fields at Ohio State. And he looks back at me and he just goes, just watch. So like I said, there's a difference between just hyping somebody up and like actually giving a endorsement like that, especially from who it's coming from. Like Julian has the experience with top guys, and he's also not a guy who's going to give you the runaround like in media. Like he's very well trained. He's very careful about the things he says, which is why I think him being that confident in a guy like Grunkemeyer is worth taking note of.
Yeah, definitely. And that's both in the short term and the long term. If they need him over the next few weeks, that's important to note and to keep in mind. If they need him in 2025, whether Drew's back and he gets hurt, or, say the scenario I laid out earlier, it's like, Drew goes off and is the star of the CFP and NFL teams want him now. Ethan Grunkemeyer could be the guy in 25. At the very least, it seems like he will be the guy in 26, or at least has a really good shot at it. Don't want to discount Jackson Smolik. Don't want to discount anyone else that Penn State might bring in, because there's a decent chance, right, Max, that they could bring in a quarterback in the portal, to just provide some cover. If not necessarily like, true competition for anyone who would be in the room, but just to provide some cover and some depth. Something to keep in mind there. But yeah, I mean, everything we've heard to this point has been great about Ethan Grunkemeyer, and so yeah, I'm not going to not take people at their word when it comes that frequently, and that like from multiple different people when it's coming from that.
Yeah, I think the transfer portal idea that you just brought up is a good place to wrap this up, Johnny. A few thoughts there, whether it's quarterback related or elsewhere. James Franklin tried his darndest to get us away from the idea of Beau Pribula leaving and Drew Allar returning today. So this question was not asked. I would have loved to ask it. It will definitely come up, whether it's from me or somebody else in the near future, whether they plan to target a quarterback in the portal. I would say I don't necessarily think it's likely, but I would not be surprised if it happens. Let me put it that way. I also wonder, and this is kind of the conversation that I'd like to have with James and maybe Andy Kotelnicki, is like, if you target a quarterback in the portal, is it a true quarterback or is it a guy that's very similar to Beau, who can come in and run an option offense with the threat to pass, but you're not expecting him to do that when he goes out there? Because I think, as we just talked about, the book on Ethan Grunkemeyer is good. Like, he may go into next year as the true quarterback number 2 behind Allar, regardless of what happens, because of his passing ability. He throws a really great ball. But I could see a world in which they bring in a guy like, I don't know, literally off the top of my head, no information whatsoever, South Carolina's Robbie Ashford, guy who was also at Auburn. Penn State seen him up close. Big-bodied guy who runs the ball a lot, has some experience. Like that, if he's willing to be a pure backup again, which who knows? Like, who knows what any of these guys in the portal want to do? A lot of them are probably portaling to be a starter. But if Penn State wants to bring in a guy like that, that would not surprise me. On the other side of this, like portal-wise, still targeting defensive line a ton. Bear Alexander from USC, former blue chip recruit, really talented guy who's produced at the college level, was on campus recently. I don't know. My feelings on that are, we talked about him a little bit last week. He's got a little bit of a strenuous history. Yeah, that was hilarious.
That was incredible for anyone listening or watching that didn't see this. So Bear Alexander, who was a high-level recruit out of high school, started his career at Georgia, then transferred to USC, and now is in the portal again. So he visited Penn State this past weekend, and they do those kind of like hype photo shoots, whatever. And he threw up like a flex, and he has the Georgia G, the logo on the helmet, tattooed on his bicep. And it was just like, this is the portal encapsulated. Is this guy who's wearing a Penn State uniform, showing off a tattoo from his first school, and now he's looking for his third. But he's a damn good player. I mean, when he's locked in, he's a good player.
He is. I don't necessarily, he went to 4 different high schools. He's now looking for his third college program. It's not a guy who really profiles with the way James Franklin and Penn State like to work in the transfer portal. I don't love the fit. I think he's a talented guy at a position they need, but I don't necessarily think it's going to happen. Like, that's just a personal thing. Inai White, former top Pennsylvania recruit out of Imhotep Charter, defensive end who went out to Texas A&M and didn't really do a whole lot while he was there. I like that fit for Penn State because it's another position of need. He needs to put on some weight, needs to do some things in the offseason to be able to contribute. But it's a situation where Penn State can bring a guy home, low risk. You're not anticipating him to be a day one starter because of the lack of production at another place. But there's still some upside because of the prospect pedigree and the things that Penn State can do with him. I mean, look at Nolan Rucci, who's improved like crazy in kind of a similar situation. I think there's other guys on the defensive line. David Blay, who is from Louisiana Tech, was an all-conference guy. I really like that fit, and I feel like that's probably, in the not-so-distant future, probably trends well for Penn State to get Blay. He's another Pennsylvania kid who started his college career at Westchester. Like, this is a heck of a story if he becomes an impactful Division I defensive tackle.
Rams up, baby. Rams up.
Grammy. Gotta love the mascot. But
yeah,
it would be a heck of a story. I like him. And then the wide receivers are a thing. Like, they're going to keep bringing guys. I'm really intrigued by the guy they had this weekend, Ball State's. Oh my gosh, his name is Justin Bowick. That's what it was. The guy's 6'4", 200 pounds, averaging almost 17 yards a catch. I think 20 this season. Redshirted, have 2 years eligibility left. I said it on our podcast last week, Johnny. I think an ideal world for Penn State in this portal period is go get a lower level guy who's produced, and then bring in a higher level prospect pedigree guy who might need a change of scenery. I think Penn State's looking to do that. And, Bowick could be an interesting name. There's also Eric Rivers from Georgia Tech, who we said last week. So I don't know if I just rambled forever on a bunch of random names, Johnny, but if you have anything to add there, please lay it on me.
What I was going to add is I'm going to give you a pass on, blanking on Bowick's name for a hot minute, because it's been a long 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah.
Take it back to last night, Sunday night, when Beau announces on Twitter, or when that news breaks, and then he ultimately puts out a statement. You were on it right away, because I was in the Eagles locker room talking to Saquon Barkley. With the Steelers in town to play the Eagles. Nick Faribault, our great Steelers writer at PennLive, it provided him the Philly assist on that. Mm-hmm. And after the Eagles won, he went to the Steelers locker room. I went to the Eagles locker room to talk to Saquon, and Saquon's hyped about the whiteout. He hopes it snows. I know they were clearing snow off the Beaver Stadium field today. I don't think snow is in the forecast. Fingers crossed for everyone traveling. That's not the case. So I'm leaving the Eagles locker room, and I go on Twitter and I have an oh shoot moment, and you were on it. So we were all covered there on PennLive, and have plenty of stuff up already too. After today, like we said, talking to James Franklin, talking to Drew Allar, we'll have plenty more. Tomorrow morning, between your Grunkmeyer stuff, my Pribula NFL Allar stuff, and then all throughout the week as Penn State prepares to face SMU in the college football playoff. Man, me, you, and Bob and Joe Hermit will be up there on Saturday. Very much looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's a crazy time of year. Like I've said, like this is, how long have you and I been covering Penn State? You longer than me, but like the regular season always feels like such a sprint, and then you get to December and you're like, oh wait, no, this is when it really starts because of the portal and the coaching carousel and everything. But this is fun. First year of the 12-team playoff. It's interesting. I think that, like James Franklin said, college football is in a bit of a dangerous place because of the timing of everything, but certainly keeps us on our toes. Appreciate those of you who tuned in live with us today. We didn't announce it anywhere, but we got up to even like 41 viewers today. Hopefully those numbers bump up in the future as we do this, but we got some good questions that we answered. So thanks to all of you who said something. But I hope you keep tuning in with us. Like Johnny said, going to have a ton. Penn State and SMU coming at noon this weekend. I know Bob and I should have a podcast later this week previewing it. You and Bob will probably hop on at some point about God knows what. But yeah, keep with us. PennLive.com for Johnny McGonigal. This is Max Ralph on the Blue White Breakdown. Take care.